Anyone ever have a confrontation with a celebrity? I was waiting tables at a nice restaurant when Pauly Shore came in and sat in my section with his entourage. I waited on him and at one point I had spilled some mustard on the table and Pauly said, "Dude, you spilled the mustard," and yes, he was stoned off his gourd. My aunt, who has never watched a game of basketball, met Shaq in an elevator when he was at the peak of his career. Her son is one of the biggest Lakers fans and she kind of recognized his face. This was their conversation. "Aunt, aren't you famous?" Shaq, haha, you could say that. "Aunt, can I get your autograph?" Shaq, if you can guess my name. She never got that autograph. Sneaky Rumpel Shaqskin. Back in 05 or 06 when I was working for my college's event planning board, Dane Cook came to the campus for a huge comedy show and to film an episode of his HBO comedy show, Tourism. My job for the day was to be a runner, meaning I'd drive people wherever they needed to go. Usually that meant picking up lunches and buying guitar picks, but for the tourism crew, it meant driving them up to lunch in Baltimore. I was actually pretty pumped, because, at the time, I was a fan, and, more importantly, the restaurant is pretty well known for serving delicious Maryland crabs. Dane's agent was a local and really wanted to go to this place, and Dane had been throwing a tantrum about it all morning. "Why couldn't we just get something close? What's so great about Maryland crabs? Wah wah wah." We're in the car, and he starts up again, this time, laying into me. First, he criticized my driving. It was a huge 13-passenger van, cut me some slack, saying I was going too fast after complaining about how long the trip was taking. Then he asks me, how much longer until we get there? There was a little traffic, so I figured I'd exaggerate a bit and hopefully we'd get there sooner. I told him it'd be another 15-20 minutes, and he starts complaining again. Finally I snap and say something like, "You're the ones who wanted to go here. We'll get there when we get there." They ended up airing that bit in the episode, and I haven't laughed at a Dane Cook joke since. I haven't laughed at a Dane Cook joke since. Maybe he should yell it a little louder. My dad owned a liquor store in Malibu near the homes of many celebrities. I worked there for a summer and a couple regular shoppers included Denise Richards, Jay Leno and Drew Barrymore. My dad stocked these smoothies called Adwala solely on her request. She was the only one who ever bought them. However, his best customer by far was none other than Mark Hamill. He was on a first name basis with my dad. He came in maybe 3 times a week and always bought 4 packs of True Blue cigarettes. Again, something my dad carried specifically for him. His career wasn't doing too well, I guess. He drove a crappy car and his shirts were always some free promo item from a cartoon. I remember he wore a Pokemon shirt once. When I finally got the nerve to talk to him, I told him I was a big fan of Star Wars. The next time he came, he gave me a signed photo of him hanging onto Slave Lair. He signed it to Justin. Forcefully yours, Mark Hamill. Great guy. Mark Hamill is not poor. He just doesn't feel the need to parade his wealth around like other celebrities. I used to live near Jeffrey Rush and saw him down the street often. He is the same way. Nothing fancy or ostentatious about him. Not a big confrontation, but still funny. My parents were at Costco buying groceries in LA when they saw Tim Curry in the checkout line. They were quietly trying to see what he was buying, to tell stories about it later. So my dad casually walks by his cart, pretending to put back some cashews or something. He got a look in his cart, and all Tim Curry had in the cart were about a dozen boxes of frozen crab cakes. Just crab cakes, nothing else. My dad turns back around to report back to my mom, and happens to get a look at him. Tim Curry was just staring my dad down, not saying anything, just looking at him because he knew what my dad was doing and he was not in the mood. So my dad, in a panic, says loudly, "I love shellfish," then awkwardly walks back to my mom at the cart, says nothing else until they leave the store. Tim Curry probably tells this story all the time, about the man who announced his love for shellfish to him while he was waiting to pay for his groceries in Costco. My mom was organizing a book signing for Bill Cosby and she messed up the scheduling, so the fans arrived 30 minutes early. Cosby flipped out and started pointing at my mom saying, "This woman right here, she messed everything up. Blame her for your problems. This woman with the books and the schedule is making everything all zim zam dippity woo." I was on Bourbon Street in New Orleans with my brother and some friends. and my little brother points out a guy walking out of a bar with a few people in tow. He points and says, "Isn't that the guy from Hercules TV show starring Kevin Sorbo?" I look over, and surely enough it is the one and only Bruce Campbell. I walk over his way and say, "Loved you in the Evil Dead series." He points back at me and smiles and seriously says, "Yeah, me too, kid." Bruce Campbell is a boss. Have you ever opened a door at the exact moment someone else was about to do the same thing on the other side and bashed their head in? My mom did this to Leonard Nimoy. Out of all the heads I hope to never bash, accidentally or otherwise, Leonard Nimoy's would be at the top. I was a bike courier in Philadelphia during the filming of Law Abiding Citizen. Part of the job was to deliver pickup documents from City Hall, where most of the filming was going on. So one day I got out of the elevator in a huge rush only to walk into a crowd of people. I realized it was because Jamie Foxx and his henchmen were waiting for a ride up, trying to block fans away. So I ended up, in my rushed state, ramming into him and yelling out of my way. Jamie Foxx only to get awkward glances from most people that saw. Guess I took my job pretty seriously. A couple years ago I was working at a Blockbuster in Santa Monica. A customer called to check and see if we had Hal's moving castle. We had it, so I asked him for his last name so I could put it on hold. He said Cheadle. I didn't understand, so I said Cheetah. He said Cheadle again. Repeat. I ended up writing down cheat on a piece of paper and putting it in the drawer anyway. An hour later in comes Don Cheadle, who I thought was a cheetah. I was in Las Vegas with my family waiting to walk across Tropicana Boulevard when my stepmother became impatient and just jaywalked amidst afternoon traffic. A Rolls Royce came screeching to a halt, and inside was a smiling Wayne Newton who waved us to cross and insisted on waiting. The guy must be immune to buttholes. Not my story, but a friend's. She was working late at a costume design workroom at college. Late at night, all alone, she is working on a project and the doors are suddenly thrown open by freaking Patrick Stewart. He hurries over to her and asks, "You there? Who are you and what are you doing?" They talked for a few minutes before he excused himself to return to his exploring of the facilities. Apparently the Royal Shakespeare Company was in town to do a show and were at the university to meet the student actors. He had run off after the meeting to explore. My roommate had gone to a Weird Al concert one night. I shot him a text asking him to grab our mail on his way back because I had fricked up my foot in a motorcycle accident the previous day and couldn't walk. About 30 seconds later I got a text back saying, "Dear Nick, pick up your own dang mail. Love, Weird Al." I chalked it up as a joke at the time, but when my roommate got back he told me that while getting a picture with Weird Al my text popped up, and instead of taking the picture together Al grabs his phone and sends me the text. Apparently he then walked off without even taking the picture together. It sucks that he didn't get the picture afterwards, but I actually find that funny and totally in line with Weird Al's sense of humor. Hulk Hogan cut my friend in line at a barber shop. Not really a conversation, but I imagine he was yelling something along the lines of, "What you gonna do, brother, when the Hulkster has to get styled and cut by Sandai?" This is my friend's story. He was out with his girlfriend for lunch at a very fancy hotel in Dublin, Ireland, and Colin Farrell happened to be there too. This was back at the height of his fame, so my mate sauntered over to him and said something like, "Hey Colin, any chance of a photo?" Colin Farrell, being the cool dude he was then, was like, "Yeah, course man, no bother," and started fixing his hair, etc. At that point, my mate hands him the camera and poses with his girlfriend. In fairness to Colin Farrell, he didn't know what to do at first, but he did actually take the photo and they still have it to this day. The photo that Colin Farrell took of him and his now wife. I love that story. That is freaking hilarious, and he seems to be a nice guy. John Williams almost ran me over with a car when I was crossing the road to go to a Boston Pops concert he was conducting. It was freaking awesome. I almost got hit by Michael Douglas last year. He was driving erratically around Tribeca. I gave him a thumbs up based on the car he was driving, Porsche 911, and then realized who it was, and gave him a double thumbs up. He gave me the AOK sign back. We're cool. I was at an Obama rally back in August of 2007. We were at Florida A&M, in a smallish gym. We had shaken Obama's hand and talked to him a bit, and ended up following him back behind the barricade, talking to him. He ended up hugging us and all this stuff, but security was not too keen on it, so they asked us to move. Obama climbs up on the bleachers to take a picture with the band. Security ends up pushing me to move on the other side of the barricade. Not hard, but it was crowded, and I fell forward. I reached up to grab the first thing to stop my fall. It was Barack Obama's butt cheek. He laughed. Not bad. I went to a Pittsburgh Pirates game when I was 8 years old, so we went early to see batting practice. My sister and I were out leaning over the wall trying to catch a ball, and one landed just short of my glove. Now I hate myself, but I cannot remember the player's name, but he was on the Reds and he ran over and tossed the ball up to me. While the ball was in the air, this huge man knocks me over trying to catch the ball and knocks it back onto the field. The player runs over and starts screaming at the guy in a combination of English and Spanish and actually got the guy thrown out of the park. Then he had me lean over the wall and he jumped up and placed the ball in my glove and told me to enjoy the game. That player should be recognized for this. What a good guy. I used to manage a Spencer's Gifts in an upscale mall in PA. Bam Margera and his crew came in on a very slow weekday. One of his guys asks at me to close the store so Bam can shop without being hassled. Out of earshot of Bam, I politely informed the guy that we don't close the store for anyone. The guy gets loud and in my face threatening to call my bosses and get me fired. And this guy was really big and intimidating. About 20 seconds into his loud ranting, I suddenly see a fist come out of nowhere and drop the guy. It was Bam. He very calmly told the guy, who was now screaming obscenities and trying to pick himself off the floor, to shut the frick up and wait outside. He then profusely apologized and continued shopping while the rest of his crew laughed their asses off. He bought a few Shock pens and a few t-shirts. My opinion of Bam changed that day dramatically from negative to positive. My grandfather owned a large-scale electronics store that often rented concert equipment. Prince's manager came in the store asking to be helped in front of all these people who were waiting in line. The manager was apparently so annoying that, "Manager, hello, isn't anyone going to help me? Grandpa, there are plenty of people in line in front of you." Manager, "Yes, well, I represent Prince." Grandpa, "I don't care who Prince is, I'm the king." The end. One of the most embarrassing moments of my life. I met Emeril Lagasse. I saw him at a shopping mall for some kind of promotional thing he was doing there. I passed by and was looking at him and I ran straight into this big camera. It fell over and everybody just stared at me. Emeril came over and was really pissed. He was all red in the face and asked me why I ran into the camera. But nobody around seemed to notice he was being a huge douche. I told him it was an accident, but he just told me to get out of there before I caused any more trouble. Easily the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. When I see him on TV it makes me cringe and I have to change the channel. Don't know if it was confrontational so much as it was rude, but I once met David Hasselhoff at Redondo Beach when I was about 7-8 years old, so this was in the arc of his career in the mid-90s, plus my pop, culturally oblivious parents were the ones to spot him, so you knew that meant this guy was prime time. I asked him for his autograph, and without skipping a beat or looking at me he said, "I'm playing with my children right now. Beat it." I stood there not sure how to react or what to do, and he looked at me and gave me this weird face like he just smelled the most rotten thing that could ever blow into the nostrils of a human being and yelled, "Frick off, you little crap." I ran away scared. He was probably wasted. Not only was this an awkward confrontation, but one of the most traumatizing moments of my life. I was running late for work one morning in Boston, but obviously still had to get my Dunkin' Donuts. I was standing in line debating breakfast sandwiches next to a guy who had come in from a door on the other side of the store. A register opened up and I offered to let him go first. He replied, "No, after you." I was still unsure, so I was like, "Really? Please go ahead. I don't know what I told you to fricking go," and then I realized it was Gary Busey. It was terrifying for anyone to yell at me like that, but if you know anything about him you can only imagine the nightmares that followed. You have been visited by the Money Cat. Subscribe to Updoot Reddit and get rich in 3.8 days. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.